When we talk about gender, we often ask, why do men behave the way they do? But perhaps a deeper question is rarely asked. How are boys taught to become men? In today's episode, we explore this question through the powerful essay, Growing Up Male, by Professor Krishna Kumar, which reflects on how boys are socialized, how they learn to see girls and women, and how schooling, silence, and social norms shape masculinity. Today, I have with me Mohammed. Hi, Mohammed.
Hi, Monila.
We are going to take you all through a few striking excerpts from the chapter and reflect on what growing up male often means and what it might take to grow up differently.
So, the first excerpt we have here tries to capture masculinity as a product of socialization. The excerpt goes, one way for men to relate to the condition of women and their problems is by considering how boys are brought up. Their socialization as male children is concerned with women. In order to become men, they have to accept and behave according to a certain predetermined image of women.
I think this is one of the central ideas in the essay, that masculinity is not natural or inherent, but socially constructed. Boys grow up absorbing expectations from family, peers, culture, and institutions about what it means to be a man. These expectations often include certain attitudes towards women, which shape how boys understand gender roles and relationships. What do you think, Mohammed?
I think as you said, it's a very core concept that Professor Krishna Kumar is talking about here. And it's interesting that this concept, the rhetoric on masculinity, is something I find to grow in spaces that are isolated from larger society and is exclusive to a single gender alone, leading to a greatly skewed perception of women at large. It's interesting to note how such an idea that is deemed to be exclusive to one gender is heavily dependent on its relation to the other gender here.
On the similar theme, I found another excerpt which extends the idea of socialization of boys. Enclosed by a ring of classrooms, ashok trees, and the wall, the girls' school was legally accessible through a 20-feet iron gate that was opened only twice a day, to let the girls in and to let them out. The boys' school had no such courtyard or major entrance, devoid of any symbolism of confinement. Through this excerpt, I think Professor Krishna Kumar is describing his own school days and what it was like to grow up as boys and girls in schools of those times, and probably even schools in current times.
I already have a lot of thoughts when it comes to how schools are designed, in how similar and how, constant these designs of schools have been, despite how far we moved forward as a society. What strikes me here is that even a physical space is teaching gender roles. Boys are associated with openness and freedom, while girls are associated with restriction and protection. Over time, children internalize these ideas without anyone explicitly teaching them. This idea of how men and women are taught to occupy public spaces very differently shape how both genders see themselves and each other. What do you think, Monila?
I completely agree with you there, Bob. The way both genders use public spaces definitely tells us about the way schools and perhaps even homes have conditioned them to behave. And very often the rationale offered is that of safety. Girls or women are safer in closed spaces, behind iron gates or a parda. And what about men? Are girls, women to be kept safe from men? What does this make men in their lives then? Or is it assumed that boys or men do not need so many safety measures? They can brave up and fight while women can't. This selective protection and empowering leaves one gender feeling almost helplessly vulnerable, while the other feels brave and entitled beyond reason.
I think this juxtaposition and this segregation and separation is something that really is what Krishna Kumar talks in our next excerpt as well, and its consequences on both sides. The excerpt goes, by separating the sexes, unnaturally for almost 10 years after puberty, we have invented a social system which defies all physiological, psychological, and cultural logic. When I read this, it reminds me of my own school days where we were a co-ed space till kindergarten, but come grade 1, we were separated. And this separation almost felt violent. While I was lucky to come back to co-ed early on, I've seen the impact it has on boys who were brought back to a common space much later, where all genders coexist. The struggles in navigating with the other while coming to terms with your own identity clearly takes a toll on them. I think the separation not only hampers the relationship with other genders but also with peers amongst the same gender. Boys develop a language and culture that is almost two dimensional in nature, devoid of feelings except for anger and pride, and suddenly feels inadequate and incomplete when they are introduced to the rest of society. What are your thoughts, Monila?
This excerpt makes me also remember, these couple of years in my school days, and that's when my convent school decided to segregate boys and girls into separate sections. And until then, we were also co-ed, and I don't know if this was like a social experiment that they performed, but we were in third and fourth grades then, and all I can recollect is a sense of missing, loss of the other half, the counterpart. And as children, we could not have articulated this, but we definitely did not enjoy this. The best memories of our school life were filled with fights, pranks, banter, mischief, and camaraderie with boys. Despite that, as a woman, although I studied in a co-ed education system later on, I can still say that I did not get to know boys and men. There were no structured opportunities for us to process our experiences and emotions together. As a result, with time, boys mostly began to seem like creatures who have nothing to do with emotions, are following around most of the time, sometimes even fooling around, and after a certain age, just become intense men with sense of possession, entitlement, and ownership of women. And and yes, of course, these are perceptions and misperceptions which get built because of lack of authentic experiences with each other. And that, I think, leads to objectification and stereotyping, which is the next theme to uncover in this essay. And the excerpt that unfolds this theme goes this way. The boy who learns to perceive girls as objects annihilates his chances of relating to a woman as a friend and of enriching his life with such a relationship. What do you think?
What I find powerful here is that Professor Krishna Kumar shows boys also lose something in this process. When girls are seen as objects of stereotypes, boys lose the possibility of genuine friendship and emotional connection. A great example I remember coming across is how men are perceived on the empty streets. Either they are seen invisible by the other gender or are seen as a threat. Today, especially, online spaces often intensify this divide by framing relationships between men and women almost like a conflict rather than a connection. What do you think, Monila?
Wow. I mean, I absolutely resonate with that. I like the fact that Professor talks about friendship and not any other relationship, or rather before any other relationship, because friendship takes place between equals. Two people might not be the same or equal through social lenses, but they create a level field where both play, both express, both give, and both take. To really experience that with another gender can bring so much to our lives.
On that note, let's take a pause and reflect on what Professor Krishna Kumar is inviting us to notice here today. The issue isn't that simply boys and girls are separated, but that this separation gradually shapes how we imagine one another. What begins as distance can slowly become a stereotype, and what begins as curiosity can become misunderstanding. Before we wind up, I'd like to leave our listeners with a question. If many of our ideas about gender are learned through the spaces we grew up in, what were the ideas about boys, girls, men, and women your own school taught you, explicitly or implicitly? Stay tuned to our next part as we dive further into the reading of Professor Krishna Kumar. We look forward to having your listening ears tuned into our next episode. Until then, goodbye.